Working Man Investor. Today's video, President Trump's tariffs versus Triffin's Dilemma and the Cantillon Effect. So President Trump suspended all tariffs on all countries except for China for 90 days and just left in a blanket 10% tariff. The reason he's doing this is to try to, one, raise revenue for this country, and two, bring back manufacturing jobs. While I'm not against tariffs, I do believe that there are economic forces in play that are going to make manufacturing en masse in this country impossible. The United States is currently the reserve currency of the world, and I don't feel like that's being discussed enough in the mainstream media. When you're the reserve currency of the world, you have an obligation to get your currency out to the rest of the world. So the easiest way to do that is for the United States to import things, and the easiest way for other countries to get a hold of our dollar is to export things. So other countries have to produce goods and services and export them to the United States. And the United States then buys them and pays for them in dollars. The foreign nations then take this currency and use it to settle transactions in the global economy. 60% of all transactions are still settled in the global economy in dollars, and then they'll build up a stash of dollars for themselves. This is Triffin's Dilemma. The country that is the reserve currency of the world has to always run trade deficits because it must get their currency into the global economy. That is part of the problem that we're facing now. It's part of the reason why Nixon took us off the gold standard in 1971. So if the United States doesn't get the dollar into the global economy, what will happen is the dollar will eventually strengthen. Now, I know at the time of making this video, the dollar is actually weakening. That's normal. There's a lot of recession talks right now for this country and inflation, and that will naturally just lower your currency's value. But over time, if we tariff all these countries and don't let them sell their products to us, they can't get a hold of the dollar. So what happens to anything that's in high demand and there's not enough of it? It goes up in price. In this case, we're talking about a currency. So if the whole world needs dollars to settle these transactions and they can't get a hold of the dollars so they can no longer export them, the dollar is going to get stronger. So when a country's currency gets stronger, that's great for importing because it takes less of your money to buy the goods and services from foreign countries. However, it's horrible for exporting because it takes more of the foreign country's money to buy your products. Your products become very expensive to them. And because of that, your domestic manufacturing will suffer. So the dollar gets stronger as the reserve currency of the world. That's going to hurt our domestic manufacturing. It's going to make it very hard for us to export to the rest of the world because our products will just be too expensive compared to what else is available in the global economy. On top of the strengthening of the dollar, the United States already struggles with competing in the global economy simply because our standard of living has risen so high. It takes a lot more to employ an American worker than it does a Malaysian or Chinese or Mexican worker. So the American worker needs things that these workers don't. We want some type of a retirement, like a matching 401k. We're going to have health insurance, and we need a higher wage. We can't go work for $10 a day and do very well on that. Some of these countries can. We need a lot more. So that in turn increases our cost to produce something. So we cannot produce it as cheaply as most countries. So now we're going to try to export with our high standard of living and our expensive American worker on top of having a strong currency. It's going to make it very, very difficult. So, and this is the problem with tariffs. People think that if we just stop the foreign production from coming into our country, this is going to create jobs and everything's just going to boom. However, for it to boom, we need the foreign buyer. We need other countries to buy our goods and services. It isn't just a matter of our own consumptions, the American buyer buying what we produce. We need buyers within the entire global economy as well. If other countries are not buying our products, then our domestic manufacturers in the long term are going to suffer. They can't just sell to the American people. They have to be able to sell to China, to Canada, to Mexico, to Europe. So the United States economy boomed in the 50s and 60s for several reasons. One, our standard of living was still relatively low, so our wages were competitive with the rest of the world. And two, we'd just come out of World War II. Japan and Europe's manufacturing were destroyed, so they had to buy from us. And as these countries bought from us, our standard of living increased. We were producing all this stuff, selling it to the world, and bringing in all their money. So with this, our standard of living began to increase. We spent that money. So this increase in demand then forced prices higher. As we were making more money, we were doing what everybody does. They go out and they spend, they buy more. So when they buy more, prices start to go up as things try to find equilibrium. When prices moved higher, what did the American worker do? What do we always do? We demand a higher wage. When we got that wage, this in turn increased our consumption even more. We spent that money. Because of this, it also increased the cost of our domestic manufacturing. This is the Cantillon Effect that I'm explaining to you right now. Because of this, our exports became more expensive. Our wages went up, we couldn't produce it at cheaper, and when we exported it, things became more expensive. Foreign countries noticed this. So what they did in turn is they began to build their own factories with the plan to try to keep our manufacturing out because they could produce it cheaper because their labor costs were lower, because their workers needed less money to survive. So at first when they began to produce it, it was junk because they had just started. They didn't have the technology right. They didn't have the skills, the know-how. So because of that, our manufacturing could still compete with theirs because even though ours was more expensive, it was better quality. However, like anything else, when you're struggling with something as a kid, what did your parents or your coach or whatever always tell you? Keep doing it. You'll get better. Eventually, the foreign manufacturing got just as good as ours, and it was cheaper, and we lost that trade surplus. And then it went 360. They began to sell that to us, import that to us, so it mixed around in our economy, whatever those goods and services were, only they were cheaper than ours, and our domestic manufacturing could not keep up. Because of that, our domestic manufacturing either went out of business or moved to a foreign country where labor was cheaper to produce it. So how are we going to go back to the 1950s and 60s knowing this, knowing that our standard of living is higher, it's cost us more to produce goods and services in the Mexicos and Chinas and Malaysias and Vietnams of the world, and then our currency is going to get stronger if we tariff and starve the world off from our dollar because we're the reserve currency of the world? The answer is we're not. We aren't because we're not going to be able to produce it and sell in the global economy. It's just going to be too expensive. Furthermore, a lot of people don't realize this, and the mainstream media, again, isn't covering this. There is a lot of dollar-denominated debt in the world that has to be paid back in dollars. These debts have nothing to do with the United States government, our banks, or our citizens. These dollar-denominated debts are given from one nation to another. When these debts come due, they must be paid back in dollars. So I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. I'm going to use China as the example. So they've sold a lot of products to the United States. They've built up a lot of dollar reserves. So one of the things they do is they buy our treasuries. The other thing that they've done is they began to do dollar-denominated loans. They did this to Laos, another country close by them, another Asian country. Basically, they loaned them, I think it was $8 billion roughly for them to build some wind towers. This debt has to be paid back in dollars by Laos. The only way for Laos to get a hold of the dollar is to produce stuff and sell it to the United States and get dollars and pay it back. If Laos does not pay it back, they'll have a liquidity crisis. We could have this throughout the world because there's a lot of these countries have done these dollar-denominated loans to each other. And if they can't get the dollars to pay it back, we're going to have a global liquidity crisis. These loans are just the same as your brother-in-law needs $100. You don't go to the bank and get $100. You just reach into your wallet and you give them $100. If you want to make it official, you write a contract up and say, pay me back $100 in 6 months plus 10% interest. But you're not going to accept a Canadian dollar for that. It has to be paid back in dollars. This is the exact same thing, only it's in billions and it's all over the world. Multiple countries have taken their dollar reserves and loaned it out to smaller countries so that they can build up their infrastructure. And if these smaller countries cannot sell what goods and services they have to the United States to get dollars to pay back these dollar-denominated debts that they owe other countries, and these all start coming due and can't be paid back, liquidity crisis. And that affects all of us because all of our economies are intertwined whether we like it now or not. So these are the biggest issues facing the United States in the trade deficit today. Our high standard of living leads to higher manufacturing costs. It just does. It's just life. And I'm not campaigning against going to work for $5 an hour. No, not at all. It's just an economic fact. And we're currently the reserve currency of the world, so the world needs to get a hold of our dollar to do transactions. And if they can't, the dollar gets stronger, which is a nightmare for our domestic manufacturing. So what is President Trump's goal from these tariffs? I'm not sure. This is a big chess game. I can see all the pieces on the board, but I have no idea to know what's going through his head and his economic team's head, or other countries' heads for that matter. However, because I understand these economic laws like Triffin's Dilemma and the Cantillon Effect, I understand the rules of the game that our countries are playing by. And once you understand the rules, you're not going to panic. There's a lot of panic right now. You're seeing it in volatility in our stock markets. And you see it in the consumer index, which just came out this week, which crashed, went way down. Consumer confidence is really low. People are beginning to cut back. So this is all panic and fear. When you understand the rules of the game, you're going to panic less. That's why it's important to understand things like the Cantillon Effect and Triffin's Dilemma, which I have more videos on the web, YouTube. So if you like what you saw today, go ahead and like and subscribe. That's what I got for you today. Working Man Investor. Keep grinding, people.